Well, hatred is an aspect of fire element, or you could say it's an expression of fire element. Think about the experience of hatred. First of all, it's one of extreme focus. There's really nothing like hatred and or being in love, two ends of a spectrum, neither of which is very balanced. Although being in love is more pleasant, but it's just as obsessional. So hatred is extremely focused. Hatred works the details. So this is the relationship to fire element. It has this incredible focus of attention and incredible focus on details. When you want to hate someone, or when you are compelled to hate something or someone, you have this clarity of vision, but it's like being locked up in a little cell with one movie playing the whole time over and over and over and over again. And hatred, of course, builds cases. That's how it functions. In order to sustain hate, you have to build cases, and those cases get more and more details added to them. So this is all this aspect of fire element, its relationship to vision, and of course the enlightened essence nature of fire element, of uh, of fire or anger, is clarity, right? So that clarity gets just compressed into this very narrow monomaniacal track. And then fire element is raging, and we call that raging feeling of fire element hatred. Then the other aspect of that, because hatred relates to hell realm, naraka loka. And the word naraka also refers to the individual. So it's a experience of extreme individualism, extreme separation. What are you doing when you're hating someone, or even when you're hating yourself, right? You're basically like marking this incredible distance or incredible feeling of separation between yourself and another, or yourself and a group of people, or even within yourself. You know, when you hate yourself, you become a self divided against yourself. Right? And so hatred, uh, extreme anger that we call hatred, is masking extreme loneliness. Right? So there's an extreme lack of intimacy that hatred is producing. And it isn't possible to hate anyone if you feel friendliness toward yourself or tenderness toward yourself. So it starts with that karmic vision being applied to oneself, or an experience of someone else hating you that you internalize. Right? And that could be over lifetimes, not necessarily, something that happened in this lifetime. Could have happened, that strand could have come from anywhere, right? But one of the ways out of this, obviously eating in a way and living in a way that brings fire element back into balance, but there are karmas that are stronger than what we put on our dinner plate. And hatred, of course, is an extreme, so it's very strong feeling. So one thing to do is to let yourself feel the lack of intimacy that is created by that. Let yourself feel the loneliness. And that's extremely painful, but hatred has a lot of energy. It feels alive. And of course, when we're hating on somebody, we feel connected to them. In fact, hating or anger at another person can sustain a relationship for decades, right? Not just if you're living with that person or friendly with that person, but if you leave a person in anger, that's made out of that karmic. Of course, you can be angry. Even enlightened people get angry. That's enlightened anger, right? But what I'm talking about is that compulsive pattern of hatred or anger, extreme anger, if you leave a relationship in that condition, you could be still thinking about that person 30 years later, having never seen them ever again. It's very powerful, and it masks intimacy, masks the lack of intimacy by creating a connection through this energy of anger and hatred. So it functions much the way all the realm visions function, in that it's attempting to solve the basic experience of separation and loneliness. But in the case of every realm vision, it's also creating more distance. So it's like you're taking one step back and one step forward, or eating food and then spitting it out. I mean, it just doesn't work, right? Ultimately. And so we have to be brave enough to actually feel the lack of intimacy and the loneliness underneath that. And then, the corollary to that, it's not just about, okay, let me feel even worse. The other thing we have to do in kind of a parallel track is develop a friendly feeling toward ourselves. Mm-hmm. And from that, we can start to heal. And some of that also has to do with just a friendly feeling about being alive, a friendly feeling about being here on Earth. I mean, that's a little hard right now, but we can still do it. A friendly feeling about your place in nature, that you actually belong here, right? That you're not separate from the place that you manifested in, is also an avenue that can begin to get you out of this. But the thing that's actually the biggest impediment when people have profound anger or hatred, whether for themselves or other people, I mean, usually they come together. The feeling of self-hatred is so uncomfortable that it just has to be like projectiled out onto other people just to get relief from it.
I mean, it's kind of impossible to imagine somebody who was really friendly and compassionate towards themselves being
super. Yeah, you wouldn't do that. Yeah, that's right. I mean, in a sense, whatever you feel about yourself is what emanates toward other people, whether for better or worse. And I've talked about this so many times before, but the big obstacle with hatred or extreme anger is that your vision is so clear, and you actually have convinced yourself that you are in a hostile circumstance, and you have to defend yourself, and you have to fight back, and you have to hurt the enemy. So, calming down, cooling off, and being able to let in the idea that your karmic vision is not actually matching what's happening. And this is super, super tricky, because if someone's already experiencing self-hatred, the last thing they want to hear is that what they're experiencing or seeing is not what's actually happening. I mean, that they're already so destabilized that it's very, very hard to do that in a lot of cases. It just takes enormous sensitivity, and it's, perfect timing almost to be able to do that. And then if, the people that experience hatred, which I would say there's no way to experience literal hatred without self-hatred. Often don't have much ability to self-reflect with any kind of self-irony or sense of humor or anything like that, which is pretty much a requirement for self-realization. Because we have to denaturalize our patterns. We have to experience our patterns, but we also have to realize that they're kind of funny and they're not really who we are. And we have to realize the ridiculousness of our situation and the absurdity of our reactivity. All of those things are just great, great, great tools. But of course, people who experience self-hatred and a lot of anger are the most earnest folk. It's a hard one.
She was talking about hatred, how privilege is made up of acts of hatred. Like the act of enacting privilege is an act of hatred.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Yeah. What did you think of that?
Well, it really made me just curious about hatred. It was just a different way of hearing that than
Mhm.
I had encountered before, and so I was curious
Mm.
about it. And it kind of seems like hearing you talk about hatred, there's a fundamental like lack of respect for the other person and lack of
Well, there's lack of empathy,
yeah,
lack of ability to put yourself in another person's shoes, or
yeah,
even desire to imagine what their experience is like.
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because so much privilege is so unconscious.
yeah.
It's something you're born into for whatever reason.
Mm.
And you have to, there have to be some circumstances where you notice that. And one of the circumstances would be you just empathize with other people and you notice they don't have what you have,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the privilege is like automatic, right? It's not.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'd have to think or read. I have to read the book to find
Mm-hmm.
out
Yeah.
what I would think about that. But
Mm-hmm.